Terrible about that.
Good morning, Stan.
Good morning to you.
Okay. All right. We are on 6A at the very top.
6A.
Yeah. I'm a Yehuda. It's about 7 lines down. So we've been discussing the issue of grave markers and the details of preparing grave markers to warn people that somewhere is tame, so they shouldn't bring their non-tame food, especially if it's truma, which is not allowed to become tame. But also people have, as we've seen in the Gemara, there were people who had the custom to eat everything in the state of non-tame status. Anyway. Amar Yehuda, Yehuda says, "Matzav mitzianas." If you found a stone marker for a grave, but you don't know exactly. Obviously, it's not like it's printed saying exactly where it is. It's a marker for a grave, and it's a stone. And how do you know it's a stone? Because mitzianas, it's coated with something. Apparently, they used to use lime. Yes, we use the Gemara. Here you go. Come up. They used to use lime to mark the stone. So if you find a stone with lime, so tachteo tame. So you can assume that what's underneath the stone is what is tame. I don't need this page. Shtaim, if you found two stones next to each other or close to each other. So what do you think? Is it each one marking a particular grave, or is it marking the two edges of one area that has buried people beneath it? So if it's marked with lime between the stones, beinehem tame. So then, excuse me one second, Lily. I'm teaching Gemara. You want to listen? That's fine. But if you want to read, go read with Daphna. Okay. It's up to you. If there's markers like line marked between the stones, and obvious beinam tame, then that means that the area between them is what's being marked. But if there's no marking between them, beinam tar, then you can assume each stone is an individual marker, and between them is no problem. So the Gemara says, okay, so let's understand what this rule is. Doesn't mean even there's no indication that there was any plowing done between the stones. Is it still tahar? in between Batanya, but we have the brisa that's against that. Matzav nachas mitzianas. Similar brisa. If you find one stone that's marked tachtei tame, then that means underneath it is what's marked. Shnaim, if you find two. Im yesh choresh b'neim. Here, this brisa says if there's a plowed area between them, then b'neim tar. Then you can assume that people must have known that this is okay to use, and they've plowed in between them. Then it's fine. V'im lav b'neim tame. And if it's not plowed in between them, then you have to assume it's tame. So this brisa uses a different criteria. The first brisa said the criteria is if it's marked with lime in between them, it makes it tame. And this brisa says, no, there's no lime expected. It's whether it's plowed or not determines whether it's considered tame. Amar of Papa, so Papa answers, haha. In the second brisa dealing with plowing, kisha seed shafo haloshan umarudo lakan lakan. Look at the stones. Okay, if the lime is like poured on top of the stone, and it's kind of spread down here and there, like the side. It appears that the sides of the stones got lime on them from when you poured the lime on the top, right? The kind of a spillover. So then you use the rule ika harish ben tar. Then you use the plowing rule. So, okay, what's the status? Like, did people mean to mark in between, or did they not mean it to mark in between? So then you use the plowing rule. If it's plowed, then it's considered tahar, and if it's not, then it's not. Below, if it's not plowed, then you can assume that where did this lime come from? Oh, people must have marked the area in between with lime, and that's how the lime got onto the sides of the stones. What happened to the lime in between? Whatever, it got trampled, blew away, whatever. That's when you use the plowing rule. Okay. Amar Ravasi says, Meitzar echad mutziyah. If you have one boundary of a field is marked, so that strip, it's not marking off the field, it's marking off an area that's tameh. But it doesn't apply to the rest of the field. Shnayim, what if two boundaries, two sides of the field are marked? Same thing. Haim tameh and v'chol sadekula tahara. You still assume that it's only the marked area and it's not delineating a larger area. Shlosha, if there's three sides of the field are marked, haim tameh v'chol sadekula tahara. Same thing. Arba, but if all four sides of the field are marked, then haim taharin v'chol sadekula tameh. Then that indicates that it's marking the entire area, not just the area under, not just the borders on which you poured the lime, on which you've marked it, but it's delineating the whole field. Yamamar, and what's the source for that? You don't distance the marker from the location of the tumah, as we said yesterday, so as not to make any of the land of Israel unusable. Okay, so in other words, we're basically minimizing, like in the case where all four sides are marked, it's quite obvious that the whole field is considered tameh. But in all the other cases where only 1, 2, or 3 are marked, then we will err on the side of leaving more land available and not tameh. Okay, next thing in the Mishnah, we're moving on from the grave markers, and now we go to the inspections for kilayim. You're not allowed to mix the different kinds of produce. So Yotzin Alpha Kilayim, they would send out inspectors on Chol Moed to inspect for kilayim. V'kilayim b'chol shemod nefkinas. The Gemara says what? That's when you send out inspectors on Chol Moed Pesach. We're minu, but we have another Mishnah. You make the announcement, like you start sending out proclamations about, like, hey, everybody, make sure you don't plant any kilayim. That you do on the 1st of Adar. And then, b'chamisha sarbo karin some Megilah, on the 15th of Adar is Purim. You read the Megilah b'krachim in the walled cities. And you start repairing and clearing the roads, and measuring the mikvahs to make sure they're still full. And you do all of the public works that you need to do. And you mark the graves. And you send out the kilayim inspectors. This is all on the 15th of Adar. So what is this a month later on Chol Moed Pesach that you're sending out the inspectors?
Are there rules regarding what crops can be planted next to each other or in the same?
Yes, absolutely. The rule of Kilayim biblically is very circumscribed. If I remember right, it's only like wheat and grapes, or wheat and olives. Grapes and olives. There are only a few kinds, which I don't remember exactly the details. And then rabbinically, they added on some other things. So I think, I could be wrong here. But I recall that like even grafted fruit trees rabbinically would be a problem. Now the produce is not forbidden. So if somebody else sells me a nectarine, I'm okay. But I can't create nectarines by grafting peaches and plums together. Okay, so I think so. I'm not certain about that, but that's what I recall.
There's so many different fruits today that are hybrids.
Right?
We can eat them, but we're not allowed to actually plant them.
Right, or graft them. I mean,
Right.
if I don't know if you already have a nectarine, can you grow a nectarine tree from the seed? I'm not sure. Or do you have to take a fresh plum? And I don't know the details. So yeah, so a lot of the restrictions are rabbinic. The biblical ones are pretty circumscribed. Okay, so we have this contradiction here today. You send out the inspectors on the 15th of Adar or on Chol Moed Pesach. Rav Elazar, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina. So we have two answers. Hadamar, one of the answers is kan b'achir, kan ba'afil. We're talking about two different kinds of crops, right? Some crops you plant earlier, some you plant later. So you have to send out the inspectors twice, right? Or not with the planting, but where it becomes like, where the inspectors, they're not telling people what to do, they're inspecting and uprooting. So it's when they would be able to see what had happened. And the other one, or the other answer, one is for grain and the other is for vegetables. So the same idea though, like there's two different periods where you would be able to recognize if there were kilayim in the field. Amar Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yochanan. Ravasi said, "Lo shalom shein nitzan nikar." When do you like, what are these dates for? The 15th of Adar and Chol Moed Pesach. He's saying actually you could send out the inspectors earlier, okay? But you would only send them out once the fruit or the produce was budding and you could see what, it's recognizable, right? But if the conditions were such that you could recognize kilayim even before these dates, then you go out earlier. Then yotzin alayah. Then you could send them out earlier. This is like now it's unclear, like what if the 15th of Adar comes and they're still not budding, right? Like would you still send people out on the 15th of Adar? That doesn't seem to make sense, but the Gemara doesn't really address that. Okay. Now, why is the Mishnah telling us that we should send inspectors out on Chol Moed? Like, what's so special about that date? You could wait till after the Pesach, or you could send them out before Pesach. Why dafka on Chol Moed would you send people out when we have these restrictions about work? Rabbi Yaakov says, Mishum Skar Pu'ula Demosle Gaban, because there's more people available. You're not supposed to be working on Chol Moed, right? So the labor market, there's a glut of laborers because most work can't be done, right? So it's beneficial to the community. They can hire people for cheaper, right? Because there's more people, the labor supply is greater. So we're saving money from the public purse. Amar of Zvid, V'Temer of Masharshia, where Zvid says, Shema Minaki, Avinu L'Schar, V'Truma Salishka Yavinu. This ruling indicates that where does the money come from to pay the inspectors? From the treasury, from the community, from community funds. These are because if you had thought that, we actually charge the farmers for the privilege of being inspected, right? It's like a user pay tax. If it's sorry?
Sure, I'm sure the farmers would love that.
Yeah. So if it's a user pay tax, then what do we care how much the farmers are paying? You don't have to wait for cheaper labor because we're not spending the money. It's a bit of a callous viewpoint. But anyway, it's like if somebody else is paying, it's somebody else's money. Who cares how much it costs? Okay, Viad Kama. It reminds me. Oh no, that's coming up soon. Viad Kama. So now it's like the inspectors. How much kilayim are they looking for? So the assumption is that, listen, you can't control if the wind spreads seeds of one kind into another field, right? That's like at what point is there enough of the second of the mixture that it becomes forbidden? Amar Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yitzchak, Shmuel says, "Kiyasus Sheshamini." We have that in the Mishnah. Kol sa'ah sheyesh ba rova zera mimin acher. If you have a field that grows the quantity of a sa'ah, a bushel, whatever that measure is, and you have at least a quarter kav of a different species mixed into it, then what you do is you reduce it, right? In other words, that's the lower limit. If you find that much of a second species in the field, then harvest it, thin it out so that there's less, and then it's okay. Well, Tanya, so Gemara says, wait a minute, there's a brisa. He's keen shehu mafkirin kol sadakula. Can you hear me okay, by the way? I know there's background noise.
No, I hear you fine. I hear everything.
Well, Tanya, but we have a brisa. He's keen shehu mafkirin kol sadakula. Another brisa says that when they find kilayim, what do? They don't thin it out. They basically confiscate the whole field, right, from the owner, right? So what is it? Do you thin it out, or do you punish the owner by confiscating the field? I says, no, Tasha, no problem. Oh, they made a rule at one point. Like originally they would thin it out, and then they saw, I guess, that it wasn't deterring people from planting kilayim, so then they instituted instituted a rule that we're going to just confiscate the whole field. The Tanya, and we have a brisa that tells us that. But originally, what would the inspectors do? They would uproot the kilayim, right, and they would feed it to the animals because there's no prohibition in using the kilayim. You're just not allowed to grow it, right? So they'd feed it to the animals, right? So the owners were happy twice over, right? The one thing, that they didn't necessarily deliberately plant kilayim, right? They're actually happy that in my wheat field, they're, taking out the barley, which I didn't want. So they were happy about that. And also they uprooted the barley and they gave it to our animals to eat. Doubly good, right?
Well, the animals,
so very happy, right? So he's keen to say who okrinu mashlichin al drachim. So they decided, you know what? We're not going to feed the animals anymore. We're going to uproot the crop and throw it away, right? Just throw it on the road. So I used to make it simple with Noah. So it was still good for the landowners. Shemanakshi, so the thing, because they're still, uprooting the crop that they didn't want. So then they decided, you know what, we're just going to confiscate kilayim fields from the owners. That way they will be more careful to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. Reminds me of the joke, in the old Soviet Russia, Boris calls Vladimir one day and says, Vladimir, what happened last night? The KGB knocked on my door. They said an informer told them there were diamonds contraband diamonds hidden in my wood pile. They brought some axes and they chopped up all the wood. And, then they couldn't find anything and they left. Vladimir says, amazing. Listen, tomorrow I need my vegetable garden plowed. You make the call tomorrow. Okay, next Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Rabbi Elazar says, you can draw water or divert water from one tree to another. You just can't plant the whole. You can't irrigate the whole field. So you're talking about trees in an irrigated field. So the trees, the trees don't really need to be watered. They can survive on rainfall, right? So since that doesn't, so number one is you're not really enabling the growth, you're enhancing the growth, and also just diverting a channel of water is not like digging a new channel, so it's not as much trouble. So that's why it's permitted. And if you have plants that were not watered before the holiday, you can't start watering them on Chol Moed, because apparently, according to Rashi, presumably, like once you start watering, we got to keep going. Otherwise, they're gonna die, right? But if they haven't been started yet, then you're okay. Then they can wait another few days. And the rabbis say no, both of them. Whether they've been watered previously or not, if they need them, if they're going to perish from lack of water, then you can still water them a whole way. Amar Yehuda says, "Im haisa sadam to nenes mutar." If it was like, let's say you hadn't watered the field before, but it was a damp field. The weather was damp, or whatever. So the plants had started germinating or whatever because they had moisture, and now it's Chol Moed and it's dried up, and you need to water it. Then that comes under the same rule because they're in danger of perishing. So you can continue watering them on Chol Moed. Supports to that. When they said you can't water these plants on Chol Moed, repeating the same thing basically from a different source. The only prohibition is if you hadn't started watering them before the holiday. But if they had been previously watered, then you can water them on Chol Moed. And if it was a damp field, and now it's dried up and it needs water, then you can water it. You can't water a field that is basically dry on Chol Moed. But the rabbis say no, you can even a dry field, when it comes time to water them, they need to be watered, you can water them. Ravina says we can learn from that. Hi tarbitza, if you have like a vegetable patch, you can kind of sprinkle it with water on Chol Moed. How do you get that? How do you figure that? So they guard my tama. Why can you irrigate a dry field that the rabbi said you can irrigate the field if it's dry? The afla mashle la harfa, because the watering, the sprinkling, it like accelerates the growth, makes it grow faster, but not because they're going to die. And nonetheless, the rabbi said you can do it. Okay, so their position is, according to Rabbi's understanding of the agricultural reality, the rabbi's position is that accelerating growth is okay on Chol Moed, watering to accelerate growth. So the same applies to sprinkling a vegetable patch. It just accelerates the growth. It's not like making them grow versus not making them grow. You can sprinkle a grain field on Shemitah, but not Chol Moed. So this is contrary to what we said before about Chol Moed. Tanya, so Gemara says, "Marbitzin ben Shvis." Another Brisa says you can do it whether on Chol Moed or on Shemitah. Yeah, because we saw there were two opinions in the Mishnah, right? So one of these sources follows Rav Elazar, one follows the Rabbi.
So far, what I'm getting is that you can prevent loss, but you can't profit. That's what's sinking in now to me.
Right, but that's correct. And there's one other principle which appears to be which is disputed, but according to some, you can do something that accelerates growth rather than what's essential to growth. Okay, so those two together, I think, are the operative principles. Tanya, we have another brisa. Marbitzin Sidei Lavan Erev Shvis. You can sprinkle a grain field before Shvis, before the Shemitah year. Kadei Sheyetzu Yerakos B'Shvis, so that so vegetables will grow during Shvis. So in other words, it's not Shvis yet. You're allowed to water things, even though the purpose is that the plants are going to grow and be available during the Shemitah year. Ella Shemarbitzin Sidei Lavan B'Shvis. Kadei Sheyetzu Yerakos L'Mosai Shvis. And you can even sprinkle with water a grain field during Shemitah so that vegetables will grow there. Okay, because watering the field during Shemitah is not a biblical prohibition. And you can harvest vegetables on Shavuos, so you can water the field so that vegetables will grow. Okay, next mission. You can trap Ishus. We'll see what kind of creature that is. The Gemara will discuss, but these kind of pests like mice, you can trap them. Whether it's a orchard or a grain field, kedarko, like you usually do, on both on Chol Moed and on Shvis, because here you're preventing damage, right? You're preventing the demise of the crops that would otherwise grow. The rabbis say, kedarko. An orchard, you can do regular mouse trapping. But a grain field, you have to use some kind of a alternate method. You can't use the regular method. So this is often a dodge if something is only a rabbinic thing. So in order not to just overturn the rabbinic pronouncement, but there's a case where you need to do so, you do it in a different way than usual. And that's a common Shabbos thing also, right? Something is basically forbidden rabbinically, but there's some reason to permit it, so you can do it, but not the regular way, so that you kind of make it noticeable that you don't get into the habit of violating a rabbinical precept. It's not so issues. There's a you can trap these issues and the mice. And you can also destroy anthills. Again, obviously, ants that are detrimental to the crops. How do you destroy ant holes? So this is not a halachic thing, but this is just a practical thing. Shimon says, maybe you kind of mix the populations. You bring dirt from one anthill to the other, and then they basically kill each other. I was thinking that we'll see that there's more advice on exactly how to do this, but it sounds kind of like it might be an immunity and disease thing. It's not necessarily. I mean, the Gemara frames it as the ants will kill each other, like they'll basically go to war, which also can happen. But another possibility occurred to me is that disease that doesn't affect one, or that one colony has an immunity to, could spread in the other colony. So that's another possibility that's obviously kind of foremost in our minds these days. Amar Rav Yirmiyah Bar Shlemi Mishmei Abaye. Rav Yirmiyah says, "V'ha dekai b'trei ivrei nara." This only works when the two anthills are on two different sides of the river. In other words, there had been no possibility of them mixing beforehand. So again, this is what made me think of, if they were completely separate colonies, then they might have different immunities, right? Not that, like, who cares if they're completely separate. I mean, you could say that, well, if they're neighboring ant colonies, maybe they learn to get along with each other, so they wouldn't kill each other. I suppose that's possible too. And also, there's no bridge. There's no even like any kind of plank laid across the river to cross. There's no ropes. They're completely isolated colonies, and that's the only way and mixing the populations would be mixing formerly completely isolated colonies. And ad kama, what is considered close together, ad parsa. So parsa is a measure of distance. That's how far they have to be in order for this method to work. Okay, so we'll stop here.
Thank you, Doug. Take care.
All right, you too.
See you soon.